Okay guys, it's been too long since I talked about this topic of all things from Japanese culture, and this anime is the perfect opportunity. So get ready that now it's time to jump in and break your head in the absolute chaos that is Dandadan. For those who somehow don't know exactly what Dandadan is, don't worry, not even those who watch or read it know well either. Relax, this story is as if anime had poked a can with a pen and shotgunned a bunch of folklore, legends and myths inside, without even giving time to breathe, and in the middle of gasping for air, instead of in water, chimps will drown. Dandadan was there. Yeah, this is fine. Here we have everything that involves the dark, mysterious and more. It's alien, monster, yokai, crazier things than those weird encounters on the street after midnight. The kind of stuff that would make Scooby-Doo finally give the papers and walk out. And all this mess around, of course, someone's dong. To one side, there are some fancy aliens with willies that make your face shrink just at the thought. On the other, a turbo granny that is basically what everyone who buys a used turbo on Temu and puts it in a Nissan Altima dreams of being. But what the hell, right? Turbo Granny? How bizarre is this nonsense, right? Who would give out a name like that? I will tell you who. The Japanese folklore. But Dandadan doesn't care about patriotism and has a legend of everywhere in the world, especially from the mecca of the supernatural realm, the United States of America. And we are going to talk about everything today. Dandadan is one of those animes that became so popular that it reached that level of mainstream that it's scary just to make a video about it and have 999 people came out of the woodwork saying they are going to beat you up just because of something you said, or a bunch of 12 years old talking about the most different ways you have to die. But in this case, perhaps the criticisms are justified, because Dandadan doesn't just stay in your expected legal shonen like other mainstream stories, and is a master on how to take seriously stuff that aren't meant to be taken seriously, and the opposite as well, a mastery of mixing very well made characters with legends, myths and the likes. The story for zero reasons goes harder than your mother's sandals when you spill soda on the couch. One moment it's an alien kidnapping someone to mingle, and the next it's an insane battle with a lot of bizarre things on top of a train to infinity, while bringing everything into a more current narrative without being exactly forced like many other stories. In one episode it's an art of animation, and the next it's... Damn bro, they stole my balls. Are you going to tell me now that some other story has this level? Nope, they don't exist. But since we have already started mentioning this stuff, sit back, relax and enjoy. Let's travel around Japan. And now, you find yourself in the Hyogo Prefecture, a tunnel right in front of you. Yep, let's start with the main legend, and the one you have probably heard about briefly in 300 other videos of this anime out there. But don't worry, we won't stay just on the basic stuff, but we have to talk about the main ones, right? Tabo Baba, Ball Stealer, Crazy Cat, whatever your name for her is. She may seem very straight to the point like many others say, but she's not based on just one legend and that's it. Immediately, she's based on the Hyakkigo Baba, a very recent yokai, and like all yokai, her story has several variations that occur with the spread of the tale across the Nipponic country, with different reports depending on the person and the region. But basically the consensus is what we saw in Dandadan, an old lady that runs at 100 kilometers an hour. In some stories, she literally runs with her legal feet. In others, she drives a car. She often appears only at a glance, but her objective is always to cause an accident, forcing you to run away from her. Like most Japanese tales, especially those about yokai, the Hyakkigo Baba is a cautionary tale to show the consequences of driving aggressively or over the limit on Japanese roads, which by the way is 100 kilometers. But in Dandadan, Grandma Turbo mixes with other things besides this yokai that appeared during the internet era. When she turns into a kitten, she becomes a Maneki Neko. I'm sure you have seen one of these before, but this cat is a symbol to bring luck or even money. That's why it's used in stores, restaurants and such, and depending on the colors, they plead for attention with its paws, is different. In the case of Turbo Granny, it's the basic white, luck and happiness. The origins of the Maneki Neko are unknown, but there are several stories that are credited as its origins, like the one with the samurai who is saved from lightning by a cat from a priest in the Gotokuji temple, or when a courtesan's beloved cat saves her from a snake, even though in the story it's just his head that saves her. The stories of Japanese folk tales have no limits, okay? So it's really like that. But one of these stories fits suspiciously well with what we see in Dandadan, a old lady who loved her cat very much, but was forced to sell it because of extreme poverty. But one day in her dreams he appears and asks her to make a statue of him, and with this statue, the old lady's life became happy and prosperous, bringing riches to her entire family, kind of like Grandma Turbo supposedly helping bring Okagun's golden balls that were scattered around back. That, by the way, Kintamas also have a connection with the supernatural. Okay, yeah, it's the way for the Japanese to talk about balls, like just saying my nuts or something like that. But the origins of this use come from the Edo period, in the legend of the Tanuki, who had a giant bag and supposedly helped craftsmen make gold leaf. Got it? But the reality is that the people who worked with metal in the Kanazawa region used the animal's skin to wrap the gold in the process of hammering the metal to reach the thickness of a gold leaf without cracking. Feels bad, right? But anyway, the last legend that we can connect with Abobaba, at least in this first season, is the tunnel. Wow! Tunnel. What's so interesting about this pine? The thing is, Japan experienced a huge development boom a few decades ago. The population was exploding, the economy was growing wild, and this was the perfect cradle for the expansion of infrastructure across the country. At this point, you must be tired of seeing those news titles like small Japanese towns are disappearing because the population is decreasing and young people are going to the city, and such and such. But for this to happen, these little towns, these villages, were at some point full of life and business opportunities and lots of people living there. At the time, with the development of the Japanese automotive industry, roads were created and improved everywhere to make people's lives easier, and it was often more financially viable to blow a tunnel in the middle of a mountain to connect one village to another than to go around. And let's remember that Japan is an extremely mountainous country, but with these places that once came and went dozens and maybe even hundreds of people a day decaying over time, several of these tunnels fell into disuse, some were no longer maintained, and many without their original reason for existing fell abandoned throughout the country. That innate fear of seeing a dark hole in the middle of nowhere in a mountain entered the level that was familiar to everyone, but at the same time everyone understood that strange feeling, becoming a very effective environment for urban legends and scary stories. Although it's quite likely that many of them actually had horrible things happen. Then several tunnels across the country began to be known as cursed. Remember the 100 kilometers Granny? One of the main variations of her story takes place in a tunnel that the guy is zooming through at 100 kilometers an hour, and out of nowhere he sees a lady zooming even faster in straw sandals and scares the guy. One of the explanations for this story is that they say it's a very common sight in the Japanese countryside, which doesn't have much sidewalk infrastructure and such, so legal old ladies really walk on roads without lights to get where they need to go. Does it make sense? Yeah, it does. Now if the story portrays that, yeah, it's cool to think of the image of a lady running like hell, right? But this is exactly how legends or folk tales began, and the tunnels follow the same line of thought. The crab that comes out of the grannies at the beginning is also a variation of this, an accumulation of victims' souls in that abandoned place taking a grotesque form to take revenge or pull more people into the tragedy. Momo mentions that her grandmother says that the dead turn into freshwater crabs to pass through the river Styx, and seeing how the faces of the woman who suffered are on the back of the big crab, it is a reference to a species of crab called Heikegani, a crab that has the supposed face of a warrior who died during an ancient battle of the Taiga clan, with retaining the soul of that person. It's not an yokai or anything, but it's an ancient legend that helped this crab's population countless times just because of its relationship with this superstition. More or less the same idea that the Turbo Granny takes on that role, protecting and offering help to the souls trapped within it, due to visceral reasons to perhaps console them and ease the suffering. And also in that first final battle on the top of the train, I perhaps wouldn't say it's a real reference and all, because I mean, not everything in the story has to be a reference, but possibly, and would fit nicely, the train be related to the famous Train to Nowhere, which is a very common tale in all types of places, regardless of which country you are from, taking several shapes: a train, a bus, a plane, a ship. I'm sure at some point in your life you have heard something about this, and that morbid feeling of being taken to an unknown place beyond your control, just like Momo, Karun, and Aira suffer at the same moment. Speaking of Aira, best character, but
excuse me, what?
with one of the Kintama, now she can see a different being that in the same vein as the Turbo Granny, it's an urban legend, a recent yokai too, but much less famous and talked about out there before the release of Dandadan, right? Because maybe it's not as flashy and brutal as Granny's, despite involving a creature doing acrobatics out of nowhere. It's a tale that began in Fukushima with the encounter of a group with a woman or even a child that is different from the norm, wearing a red dress and long black hair. This person appears several times to this group and at certain points even introduces herself as Saga Saga. She often seems to be lost and tries to ask for help. Then at this opportunity, she lives up to her name as an acrobat and starts doing crazy things with her body around her person and disappears. Yep, no one dies, no one goes crazy, nothing. She just disappears. But they say that whoever sees her performance is cursed for the rest of their lives with bad things happening that then can cause death, as she's a very recent and a very prominent urban legend on the internet. She doesn't have much of a teaching like most ancient yokai, so many people are very resistant to say that she is a yokai, beyond being a small myth or creepypasta. But the fact is that regardless of how silly the origin is or how it came to be, hundreds of years ago, the yokais in quotation marks real started the same way. But don't worry, even if Akusara doesn't kill you right away and that she only wanted to show her amazing moves as we saw in the story, it's not the end of the world. There are ways to deal with her, and the most ideal is to just see a person who knows well how to deal with spirits, even if they end up being in reality aliens. But for her, aliens don't exist. To deal with this whole part of the world, you can learn from Santa Dodoga. Wrong Dodoga, this one. The other old woman who doesn't look old for some reason. But well, what's up with her? Let's start here with something small that is actually very big. In the beginning, what was protecting her house from the bad creatures? And Ofuda, damn, I'm great with the transitions today. Sheesh. The legal piece of paper they use isn't only just a legal plot device, and many of you who are a little more familiar with Japanese culture know that they are very present everywhere in the country. Ofuda are like a talisman, usually placed in a fixed place to ward off evil, literally and spiritually. Depends a lot on what is written or drawn on it. In the case of Dandadan, it's different in the manga and in the anime. Relax, I'm not going to say anything much about the manga, but it's just that this here is a little interesting and not much changes. In the anime, an Ofuda from the Edo period is shown, one used simply for home safety. That's literally what it's written. It's a somewhat generic Ofuda that can have several different designs, but generally does not have a figure, just words. This one in this case looks a little like the god of wind, Fujin, and even more like Agyo, who is one of the guardians of the Todaiji temple, and he means local protection and violence, chasing away evil spirits, fitting a little more with the idea used in Dandadan than Fujin, But yeah, the situation where he's eating some little human beings in the drawing doesn't fit very well with either, so maybe it's really something original to this story. Now in the manga, it's an amulet depicting Ryogen, who is the abbot of Engyakuji, a very old Ofuda that represents this great monk, who could transform into a demonic form to ward off evil spirits under the name of Tsunodaishi, back in the 10th century. So in this case, it's something much more specific than the one in the anime, and also more fitting with the idea that was used in the story. Why did they change it? I have no idea, although in theory it works out the same. But maybe it has something to do with the way Seiko uses her powers, since she uses the powers of local entities to deal with her medium activities, and the story does not take place in the same city as the monk, so maybe it's something with that. In any case, in the future, the manga uses the same as the anime, so... But anyway, I'm sure you have seen stuff like this in several other animes or mangas. When we watched another the other day, they even bumped on this topic, but each region of the country has its legends, its yokais, and its protective spirits. An entity that is believed to protect a mountain does not protect the mountain next door, for example, because there will be another entity doing the same. And that's the whole idea behind Seiko's power, the limitations with the big crab and such, where she has to keep her faith in those who help her locally to maintain her activities in the city they wield power. That's why she can't do much outside of Kamigoe. Her character, everything she does is based on this other side of old legends, religions, and not necessarily yokais. What should and can be done to interact and deal with different beings. Her drawn barriers, nails, and beatings with a baseball bat all spring from ancient rituals and beliefs that were passed down from generation to generation without being forgotten by time. Even the togi in front of her house conveys this idea of defense, where outside is the normal world and inside is a sacred place. But it's interesting that her bat has Neshi no Chikara written on it, the power of Nessie. Yep, now it's time. We have already talked a lot about the Japanese side of the legends. Now it's time to talk about the aliens, and also the folktales from the rest of the world, but aliens. Whoa, what is this? Well, seems like we have to leave aliens for later. The monster of sound is knocking, and let's talk about the opening. Now Legal Green Man, get out of here, and I'm going to turn this song up because it's so damn good. So let's do it. What does the opening has to offer us? Right away at the beginning, there are two crazy dudes dancing pipi in a bizarre black room. This is no yokai, these are the song creators. What's wrong with you? This song here was made by Creepy Nuts. Amazing name right there with Bump of Chicken. But anyway, this song is very smart and surprisingly deep, beyond the dun 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 dun, especially if you can understand the grammatical structure. But my Japanese is not quite to that level to teach you anything, and we are here to talk about the supernatural reference it has. If you put the song on volume 4 at 4 in the morning, in the 4th day of the 4th month, the devil will appear dancing to Selena Gomez next to you. Speaking of supernatural references, even though it's the opening, they are often not the same as the anime itself, which is pretty neat. Right from the start, we have already a superstition. This saying comes from around the 9th century, and there are several mentions in literature throughout the ages. It is believed that the origins came when an aristocrat was trapped, exiled, and killed, and after his death there were reports of a bizarre thunderstorm throughout all the surroundings. The people who set up the trap to capture him were scared shitless, so trying to not die to budget Raijin, they dedicated a kind of prayer to him, and also then lifting the Kitano Temmango in Kyoto. The lands that this aristocrat had were called Kuwabara because of the plants he had in the property, so people shouted Kuwabara, Kuwabara when the rain started to fall to prevent lightning from striking their head, with the idea of he would couldn't strike down his own farm, right? Dude basically became Zeus that can't even strike down a mulberry plant. But after so much time passed, the saying basically became detached and turned it into something to bring good luck or to avoid any problems, like knocking on wood, throwing salt over your shoulder, or anything your country does to the same effect. Right after that, we have a reference to one of the main inspirations of the author of Dandadan. Sadako vs Kayako is a Japanese horror comedy movie released in 2016. It was a crossover between The Ring and Ju-On. Basically, the movie pits two urban legends against each other, and there we can see several ideas that Tatsuya Yokinobu used to create Dandadan, which is cool despite being quite morbid. But what can you expect from a story that revolves around someone's golden balls? The time 4:44 is a critical moment of the night, because in Japanese, one of the ways of saying the number 4, yon, is the same pronunciation as the kanji for death, which is shi. It's like the number 13 being the unlucky number, 3 AM being the witching hour, and 6 AM being the time I go to work. And that's why many places in Japan don't have the number 4 nor even floor number 4 to avoid any superstition related shit. And after this part, they continue to rhyme 4 times, repeating words in 4 sections, 4 feet away, noise getting closer and closer, as if a monster is coming for you, but it's too late, it's already inside you, screaming. This references the tale of the Yamanoke, which is also a relatively recent legend, basically an underground creepypasta that tells the following story. Passing through a mountain on the border of Yamagata, in a forest a girl is possessed by a headless pale creature with a face on its chest, just like Jamira from Ultraman. And when that happens, only the voice saying "I'm inside" is heard. If nothing is done within 49 days, the child becomes a creature similar to the one who possessed her. But as the song goes on, they make us think that this possession might not be so bad, just like the old Turbo Granny with Okagun, saying goodbye to the darkness, as if wings grew behind your back and freed you from the worldly plane, with a nostalgia to easily marvel at what perhaps has no explanation, even if at the moment there is a creature living inside you, day after day, behind your eyelids and inside your ears. But anyway, after that, there are a lot of other references, especially other animes, and when talking about the Chainsaw Massacre, besides referencing Chainsaw Man, there's another layer with the fact that the author was also an assistant on the work, and even another one referencing the old slasher horror movies. And soon after that, we come to see the river Styx that we have already mentioned it before, a river in Greek mythology that souls cross to reach the underworld. Only no Chamba guys to talk about Demon Slayer? No, my friend. Well, that too, but only are those guys right there. Figures very present and important in Japanese culture. There are several stories about them, from torturing fishermen to hell, to riding on a cloud and flying around. They are so prevalent that they play a big part in the Setsubun holiday in early spring. Pandora's Box, you have heard the name, also from Greek mythology. Originally it was a jar, not a box, and obviously if you open it, shit comes out everywhere. It's crazy, people jumping, doing somersaults, your hands turn into a schlong, and John Cena pops beside you with an ice cream. Things get fucked. Well, you got the point. Shyamalan is a guy who makes supernatural films or something, but curiously, the way the Japanese accent says his name matches suspiciously with Shamagan, half woman, half snake creature from Iranian folklore. As its natural phallic shape, they say it has something to do with Willis, but someone finds her, learns a lot of things, but when it's time to leave, a lot of bad can happen. Basically, she gives you an entry-level course in automotive mechanics, then curses you until your 80th generation. My dude, you have no idea, even the fucking title has something cool. It is basically a reference to the nomenclature for categorizing yokai, according to the place they are found. For example, those who lived in the mountains were called Yamanoke, mountain creatures like the one we have already talked about, that poor kid. Those from the river were called Kawanoke, the ones from the sea Uminoke, and so on. So Otonoke would be a creature of sound, giving an idea as if the song was sung by an yokai belonging to sound, which is kinda creepy, and suddenly the possession being a good thing makes sense. Well, for the monster that is. You and I, we are probably... Anyway, where was I before this? Aliens. I just hope the Men in Black don't come after us just for talking about this, but the truth is, we have 3 aliens this season, and a Kappa isn't one of them, right? It's another yokai that it's impossible for you not to know. It's this little dude that lives in a river, has a bow on its head. You have to make him bow to you and spill the water, otherwise you are dead, and it will put his hand into your bum and pull out your soul. But I mean, they are cute, right? The rest doesn't matter. Even though Kagun gives a little exposure in the last episode of the season, along with Tsuchinoko, which is a Japanese cryptid legend, primarily from the Naga region. It's a fat little snake that can steal your beer, tell you lies, and bite its own tail to get away with it rolling. What a stupid little boy. But are you shit? I'm already talking about Japanese legends again. Now it's time for ET, bro. Okay, what I was saying... Yeah, so Tago, like Turbo Granny and Akusara, is also an urban legend. One that goes around schools that has an anatomy doll and such. Mine never had that, so I trust you guys. Some say it's a mischievous spirit. Others say it's an yokai possessing the doll. But man, alien, what about them? Okay, sorry. Japanese tales are just too enticing, but aliens, the Segpos, are not based on anything supernatural or extraterrestrial, but on things from Ultraman. If you want to see Ultraman as something supernatural, that's up to you. The same things as Penitin Kosu or Piniwini, that despite being based on the Dover Demon, when he takes the steam from the Segpos, his design is also from Ultraman. Honestly, I have no idea how this is related to this little extraterrestrial from Massachusetts, other than the idea of him being an alien and the cow scene? I don't know. And him having milk as blood has nothing to do with the Dover Demon. But the real creature, in quotation mark, in your real world, is a being that is somewhere between cryptid and alien. People don't seem to agree, and perhaps Seiko saying that he's a Kappa may be a nod to that, and maybe has a small piece of veracity behind it, like the urban legends. But just like the Flatwoods monster is an encounter that has become extremely popular in Japan for some reason, to the point that it even has merchandise. It is possible that Piniwini is more based on the Japanese mutated variations than the reports of the small bald creature with green eyes from the New England region of the United States. Now the Flatwoods monster is a creature found in West Virginia. Right, I don't even need to say that the original story is not a Sumotori, right? It's also known as Braxy, a creature supposedly seen in the 50s, where shortly after a bright light crosses the sky, a curious group goes after to see what it was, and when they get there, from afar they see what looks like a humanoid creature with a red and round face that looked like a pointed hood. Each person in the group had a slightly different description of what happened, but the bottom line was the same. And after the creature came sliding through the air, making a snake-like noise, my dudes ran away and the being was never seen again. And finally, falling on the side of the cryptids and leaving the aliens aside. Despite the Segpos merging with it, we have Nessie. Everyone knows this one, and I don't even need to explain much. Scotland, different creature, old photos, mysterious animal, looks like a dinosaur. Here in Dandadan, they basically took the supposed Nessie design and mixed it with Gojira. And guess what? Another Ultraman creature too. There you go. Now, what does Seiko's bat have to do with it? I imagine if it's something important, those who read the manga are already itching to comment, but I would say that the power is in the words, so no spoilers. But for now, that's it, right? This video is already quite long. If you somehow made it this far, thank you so much, really. And how about you? Did you catch anything else? I know there are several small references, not only to urban legends, but to things that will still happen in the story, like those images from episode 10 and the opening, the books that Okagun reads, very various other background props, and also other reference to series, films, other animes, and many others like that are very interesting too. And in this idea of this video, there are more stuff like them talking about and using Key, the weird underwear guy, the mysterious room at the end, and the strange inhabitants of the city that Takumi got fucked by the Mercedes girl. But I think this is enough for this video, right? Let's leave that for the next season. Huh, who would be at a time like this, huh?